Washington is full of people who know how to talk around a problem. But the dangerous thing about federal systems is that servers do not care about spin. They do not care whether you are the director of the FBI, a White House ally, or a man sitting under oath in front of Congress trying to survive another hearing cycle. A federal system records what happened without emotion. Timestamps, file names, search activity, printer logs, badge scans, building exits, destinations. That is what Ted Lieu carried into that hearing room. At first glance, the room looked routine. Cold white lighting across polished wood desks. Congressional staff whispering behind rows of leather chairs. Cameras drifting slowly from face to face, looking for reactions that had not happened yet. And sitting in the center of it all was Kash Patel, with the posture of someone who believed he had already solved the day before it began. Calm tone. Controlled breathing. Short answers designed to leave no opening. I only reviewed summaries. Limited access. No full review. The same structure over and over because repetition creates the illusion of consistency. That strategy was not accidental. Patel's legal team clearly understood the danger sitting underneath the Epstein files. A full denial would have been suicidal because one internal access log could destroy it instantly. But admitting detailed review of the master file would invite questions his team could never fully control. So they built a narrow middle lane, admit enough to sound cooperative, deny enough to avoid ownership. It was the political equivalent of telling police you walked through the bank lobby but never touched the vault door while hoping nobody checks the security footage. And for a while, it worked. Other lawmakers asked questions. Patel recycled the same carefully engineered language. The hearing drifted along like countless others in Washington where outrage is scheduled. Clips are harvested for social media, and everyone goes home pretending accountability happened. Patel looked relaxed because he believed the fight was rhetorical. He thought this was about surviving sound bites. What he failed to understand was that Ted Lieu was not building a television moment. He was building a timeline. That difference matters. Ted Lieu spent years as a military prosecutor in the United States Air Force. Prosecutors are trained to hear structure more than words. They listen for the sentence someone repeats too often, the detail they glide past too quickly, the date they avoid touching directly. Because people telling the truth usually remember events. People protecting themselves remember scripts. And federal systems are merciless against scripted testimony because digital records do not forget what humans hope disappears. When Lieu opened the folder in front of him that morning, the atmosphere inside the room changed before most people watching understood why. Patel still believed he was operating inside a political hearing. In reality, the hearing had already become something else entirely. This was no longer Congress asking the FBI director difficult questions. This was the FBI's own internal architecture preparing to testify against the man running it. And the most damaging witness in the room was not a whistleblower, not a leaked source, not a hostile journalist. It was the Bureau's own system logs. Ted Lieu did not begin with a speech. That is what made the moment dangerous. People expect shouting in Washington. They expect dramatic interruptions, cameras chasing emotional reactions, lawmakers performing outrage for clips that will circulate online before the hearing even ends. But real prosecutorial pressure usually arrives quietly. One question, one document, one confirmation locked into the record before the witness realizes the trap has already closed. That is exactly how Lieu approached Kash Patel. "Director Patel," he said, "simple question. Have you ever accessed the Epstein master file?" Patel answered immediately because the answer had already been rehearsed long before he entered the room. "As I stated previously, Congressman, I reviewed summaries. I did not have full access to the complete file." Notice the structure there. Not a direct denial, not a direct admission. The wording was engineered to blur the line between exposure and responsibility. Experienced witnesses do this constantly. They answer the version of the question that creates the least legal risk instead of the question that was actually asked. Patel never said, "I never accessed the file." He said he reviewed summaries. That distinction matters because lawyers build survivability into language the same way engineers build crumple zones into vehicles. Then Ted Lieu asked again, "Yes or no, did you access the master file?" And Patel repeated the same maneuver. "I reviewed abstracts, not the full file." At that exact moment, the hearing stopped being political theater and became forensic reconstruction. Because Ted Lieu did not argue with Patel's wording, he reached into the folder and pulled out the first receipt. An FBI digital access log generated automatically by the Bureau's own internal system. Date: February 3, 2025. Time: 7:34 a.m. User: FBI Director Kash Patel. File accessed: Epstein Investigation Master File. Session duration: 4 hours and 23 minutes. The room changed instantly. Not dramatically, not loudly. You could feel it in the silence. Patel's posture tightened. His lawyers stopped writing for a second. Members sitting behind the dais leaned forward because everybody in that chamber understood the same thing at once. This was no longer a disagreement about interpretation. This was a collision between sworn testimony and machine-generated records. One of them was about to lose. Patel tried to recover by attacking the meaning of the session itself. It's possible the file remained open without active review. That answer may sound reasonable to casual viewers at home. People leave tabs open all the time. Documents sit idle on screens. But federal investigative systems are not YouTube videos paused in the background while someone answers emails. FBI case management platforms track behavioral activity. Subdocuments opened. Navigation patterns. Time spent inside sections. Search sequences. That is why Ted Lieu immediately introduced the second document. Page 1. Summary viewed 7 minutes. Witness index viewed 22 minutes. Financial records 31 minutes. Flight logs 18 minutes. Name index 47 minutes. 47 minutes. That detail hit the room like a blunt object because nobody spends nearly an hour inside a federal name index accidentally. The Epstein name list was not some celebrity contact sheet floating around social media. According to the records discussed in the hearing, it was a compiled investigative index tying individuals to witness testimony, financial activity, communications intercepts, and travel records connected to Epstein's operations. Being listed did not automatically establish criminal conduct, but it did establish investigative significance, which meant Patel was not casually browsing headlines. He was studying operational material tied to one of the most politically radioactive investigations in America. And then Ted Lieu reached the part of the hearing that changed the entire gravity of the room. Because up to that point, Kash Patel could still argue interpretation. He could claim the session duration looked worse than it really was. He could imply documents were opened passively. He could hide behind technical ambiguity. But the moment Lieu introduced the FBI search history logs, the defense structure Patel walked in with started collapsing in real time. Federal systems do not simply record access. They record intent. That distinction is devastating in any investigative setting because intent reveals purpose. Opening a file can be explained away. Running targeted search queries inside that file is much harder to explain innocently. Ted Lieu placed the next document on the table and began reading directly from the Bureau's own internal records. Search 1. Trump. 47 results returned. Search 2. Mar-a-Lago. 23 results. Search 3. Trump and Epstein and flights. 14 results. Search 4. Trump and Maxwell. 8 results. Notice how specific those combinations were. Nobody accidentally searches Trump and Epstein and flights inside a federal criminal case management system. That is not curiosity. That is targeted retrieval. That is somebody narrowing investigative material toward a very precise evidentiary lane involving travel records tied to Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. Flight logs matter because they establish physical presence. Dates, routes, associations. Who traveled where and with whom? Prosecutors use travel records because movement creates timelines, and timelines are harder to politically spin than headlines. And according to the records presented in the hearing, Patel did not just search those terms. He spent hours inside the material connected to them. Then came the line that froze the chamber. Page 7. Trump references. 41 minutes. 41 minutes. Ted Lieu paused after reading it because he understood something every trial lawyer understands instinctively. Silence can apply more pressure than volume. The room absorbed the number before he spoke again. Then he looked directly at Patel and delivered the point with surgical precision. You told this committee you only reviewed summaries. The FBI's own system shows you spent 41 minutes specifically inside the Trump references section. Not summaries, not abstracts, not limited exposure. 41 minutes inside indexed Trump-related investigative material tied to the Epstein file. This is where the story stopped being about scandal and started becoming something more dangerous for the system itself. Because ordinary Americans watching that exchange were not hearing legal nuance anymore. They were seeing a basic moral contrast that cuts through politics instantly. If a low-level intelligence analyst accessed sensitive investigative files, searched politically explosive names, printed material connected to those searches, then gave misleading testimony afterward, that analyst's career would likely end before sunset. Security clearance revoked. Internal investigation opened. Possibly criminal exposure. No cable news debate. No carefully crafted media defense. Done. But this was the director of the FBI, and that changes everything. Or at least, that is what powerful people count on. That the public will assume rules become flexible once someone climbs high enough inside the structure. That accountability can be slowed down, redirected, negotiated, delayed until outrage burns out and attention moves elsewhere. Ted Lieu understood that dynamic, which is why he kept stacking records instead of emotional arguments. He was constructing prosecutorial pressure brick by brick, forcing the hearing away from partisan interpretation and into documented chronology. Because chronology is merciless. One event leads to the next. One log confirms another. One timestamp seals the previous explanation shut. And Kash Patel was beginning to realize that every answer he gave earlier in the hearing was now trapped inside a tightening web of machine-generated evidence.